Okay, so get this.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be diving into the story of a woman who is suing her parents
Wow.
for $2 million
Okay.
because she claims they gave her ugly genes.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, you can't make this stuff up.
Wait.
2 sources for this deep dive.
Okay.
One is this article from dailyatomic.com,
Right.
which, let's be honest, it leans towards the sensational.
Sure.
And then we have this Reddit thread
Mm-hmm.
from, you guessed it, Bizarre Life,
Okay.
where things get really interesting. So is this just a crazy internet story, or does it actually point to something a little bit deeper about how we view beauty, personal responsibility, and
Right.
even like the limits of the legal system?
Well, it's definitely a story that will grab your attention. And, on the surface, it might seem outlandish.
Yeah.
But I think that it does tap into some very real societal anxieties around appearance and genetics.
So let's start with the woman at the center of all of this.
Okay.
Annabelle Jefferson.
Hmm.
According to the dailyatomic.com article, she's 44 years old. She lives in California.
Right.
She claims her parents' looks are to blame for, get this, 3 failed marriages
Oh, wow.
and a whole host of other issues.
Okay.
And she does not mince words.
Yeah.
She's quoted as saying her parents are so damn ugly
Oh, boy.
and that they, quote, shouldn't have been allowed to reproduce.
Well, what's particularly striking is that she goes beyond just blaming her parents.
Yeah.
She actually wants the government to step in and
Mhm.
create programs to sterilize people who don't meet certain beauty standards.
Whoa. Okay, so now we're wading into some pretty ethically murky waters here.
Absolutely.
This idea of like controlling who can have children based on their looks, I mean,
Yeah,
it has a pretty dark history.
absolutely.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, this echoes the eugenics movements of the early 20th century,
Oh, right.
which were rooted in this belief that you could improve the human race through selective breeding. But those movements led to forced sterilizations and other horrific human rights abuses,
Yeah,
often targeting marginalized groups.
absolutely. So bringing it back to the present,
Mm-hmm.
is there any legal ground for Jefferson's lawsuit? I mean, can you actually sue your parents for being ugly?
It's highly unlikely.
Yeah,
There's no legal precedent for this kind of claim.
right.
There's a concept called wrongful life lawsuits,
Okay.
which have been successful in cases where children are born with severe disabilities due to, say, a doctor's negligence.
I see.
But even those are incredibly controversial.
Right.
This case, however, is based entirely on subjective judgments about appearance,
Sure.
which makes it very legally shaky.
Okay, so legally speaking,
Right.
she's probably not going to get very far.
Yeah.
But this case has blown up online,
Mm-hmm.
particularly on Reddit.
Mm-hmm.
What are people saying about all of this?
Well, the Reddit thread is a fascinating mix of reactions.
Yeah,
Some
like-
people are finding the humor in it,
Yeah.
cracking jokes about suing their parents for other perceived flaws.
Oh, right.
Others are expressing disgust or even concern for Jefferson's mental state,
Yeah.
wondering if this is a cry for help.
Some of the comments do make you wonder,
Uh-huh.
like, what's really going on with her?
Sure.
There's one Redditor who points out the irony of Jefferson advocating for eugenics while having been married 3 times herself, as if to say even people she finds ugly can find partners.
That comment really highlights the absurdity of her argument, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
But it also raises this interesting question.
Uh-huh.
What happens when personal grievances, however misguided,
Yeah.
get amplified on a platform like Reddit?
Right.
It can turn into a spectacle, but it can also spark genuine debate about complex issues.
It seems like this case,
Yeah.
as strange as it is,
Mm-hmm.
has tapped into something a little bit deeper.
Right.
It's forcing people to think about beauty standards,
Yeah.
genetics, and even, like we were saying before, the potential dangers of trying to control who gets to have children.
And it raises some important questions, I think, for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
How much of who we are is determined by our genes?
Right.
Where does personal responsibility begin and end?
Right.
And who gets to decide what's considered beautiful?
Yeah, so while the lawsuit itself might not hold up in court,
Mm-hmm.
it's definitely gotten people talking.
Yeah.
But before we go any further, let's dig into the details of Jefferson's claims about her marriages.
Okay.
The dailyatomic.com article paints a pretty dramatic picture.
All right.
They mentioned her first husband claiming he felt nauseous every time he looked at her.
Oh, wow.
And her third husband, who was legally blind when they met,
Mm-hmm.
divorced her just a week after regaining partial sight.
Well, these are pretty sensational claims.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that we're only getting one side of the story here.
Right.
We don't have any corroborating evidence.
Yep.
And it's possible that these details are being exaggerated or even fabricated.
Yeah, that's a really important point.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to get swept up in the sensationalism,
Right.
especially when you're dealing with a story like this.
Yeah.
But we have to remember that there's always more to the story than what meets the eye.
Right.
And speaking of what meets the eye, this whole case really forces us to confront
Yeah.
how much emphasis we place on physical appearance.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious,
Yeah.
what are your initial thoughts on all of this? Is this just a bizarre legal case, or is there something more significant at play here?
I think it's definitely more than just a bizarre legal case.
Right.
I think it speaks to this deeper societal obsession with beauty and the pressure to conform to certain standards.
Absolutely.
You know,
Yeah.
it makes you wonder, doesn't it? Like,
Yeah.
if she actually won this lawsuit, which again is highly unlikely,
Right.
but where would that leave us? Could it set a precedent for others to sue their parents over any perceived genetic flaw?
Wow.
Yeah,
I
it's a
think-
slippery slope.
Yeah.
Imagine a world where parents are held legally responsible for their children's height, hair color,
Right.
or even intelligence.
Yeah.
It would fundamentally change the parent-child relationship.
And what about the implications for genetic screening?
Oh, that's a great point.
I mean, we're already seeing the rise of technologies that can tell us so much about a person's genetic makeup.
Exactly.
Right.
Imagine a future where prospective parents are judged based on their genetic profiles,
Right.
with pressure to select only embryos that meet certain criteria. Would we be comfortable with that level of scrutiny and control over something as fundamental as creating life?
I mean, it sounds like a dystopian novel,
Right.
like choosing designer babies
Yeah.
based on what's considered desirable at any given moment.
It highlights this danger of reducing people to a set of genetic traits.
Right.
We are so much more than our genes. Our environment, our experiences, our choices all play a huge role in shaping who we are.
And even the definition of beauty changes over time
Absolutely.
and across cultures.
Yeah, what one society might find desirable, another might find completely unattractive.
Yeah, so who gets to decide
Right.
what the ideal is?
Well, Jefferson, in her own way, is trying to answer that question.
Right.
Remember, she wants to start an association
Yeah.
for people who want to sue their parents for being ugly,
Right.
and even lobby for laws
Yeah.
to prevent people with certain physical traits from having children.
So she's aiming to create
Right.
the very system of genetic control we're talking about.
Exactly.
It's a chilling reminder
Right.
of how individual grievances, however misguided, can have far-reaching societal consequences.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that we have to be conscious about letting subjective preferences dictate such important decisions.
Right.
And we need to be aware of how easily these ideas, even when presented as personal grievances,
Right.
can be used to justify discrimination and control.
So we've explored the legal aspects of this case, delved into some pretty complex ethical questions,
Yeah.
and even touched on the potential impact of social media on all of this.
And while there are no easy answers,
Yes.
I think this deep dive has illuminated some crucial points.
Yeah.
This case, bizarre as it is,
Right.
forces us to confront our societal obsession with beauty, the potential pitfalls of genetic screening,
Right.
and the need to critically examine narratives,
Yeah.
especially those we encounter online.
So it's not just about questioning what we see online. It's
Right.
also about questioning our own assumptions and biases.
Exactly.
Right.
We need to be aware of how easily subjective standards, like those related to beauty,
Right.
can be used to justify harmful actions or beliefs.
Yeah.
And we need to be thoughtful about the potential consequences of new technologies, like genetic screening before they become widely adopted.
It sounds like this deep dive has been a call to action for our listener
Yeah.
to be more discerning, more empathetic, and more engaged with the complex issues shaping our world.
Absolutely.
Right.
And to remember that even in the most outlandish stories,
Yep.
there are often valuable lessons to be learned
Right.
and important conversations to be had.
Absolutely.
So the next time you come across a headline that makes you raise an eyebrow,
Right.
take a moment to dig a little deeper.
Yeah.
You might be surprised by what you discover.
Well said.
All right.
And with that, we'll wrap up this deep dive.
Mm-hmm.
We've journeyed from the bizarre to the profound,
Right.
and hopefully our listener has come away with some new insights and perspectives.
Until next time. Stay curious and keep questioning.
Excellent. Well said.
All right.
Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Take care.
We'll see you next time.
Bye. Bye. Well, aside from the marriage anecdotes, the dailyatomic.com article mentions that Jefferson has a history of mental health struggles.
Oh.
It suggests that this lawsuit might be a manifestation of deeper emotional distress.
That adds another layer to this, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if this lawsuit is less about winning a legal battle
Right.
and more about seeking validation
Mm-hmm.
or attention for her pain.
It's certainly possible.
Right.
And it highlights the need to approach stories like this with empathy and nuance,
Yeah.
even if we disagree with someone's actions or beliefs.
Right.
It's important to remember that there's often a complex human story behind those choices.
It's a reminder that we should be cautious about judging people
Mm-hmm.
solely based on sensationalized headlines or online comments.
Exactly. And it brings us back to the heart of this deep dive.
Okay.
If we strip away the shock value and the legal wrangling,
Yeah.
we're left with some fundamental questions about beauty, genetics, and the very essence of what makes us human.
So where do we go from here? I mean, we've explored this bizarre lawsuit, uncovered some disturbing historical parallels, and grappled with some pretty heavy ethical dilemmas.
Right.
What's the takeaway for our listener?
I think the most important takeaway is the need for critical thinking. We live in a world where information, especially online,
Right.
can be easily manipulated and distorted.
Right.
This case is a prime example of that.
So it's not just about questioning what we see online.
Uh-huh.
It's also about questioning our own assumptions and biases.
Precisely. We need to be aware of how easily subjective standards like those related to beauty can be used to justify harmful actions or beliefs.
Yeah.
And we need to be thoughtful about the potential consequences of new technologies like genetic screening
Right.
before they become widely adopted.
It sounds like this deep dive has been a call to action for our listener.
Yeah.
To be more discerning, more empathetic,
Mm-hmm.
and more engaged with the complex issues shaping our world.
Absolutely. And to remember that even in the most outlandish stories,
Right.
there are often valuable lessons to be learned and important conversations to be had.
Absolutely.
So the next time you come across a headline that makes you raise an eyebrow, take a moment to dig a little deeper.
Yeah.
You might be surprised by what you discover.
Well said.
Okay.
And with that, we'll wrap up this deep dive. We've journeyed from the bizarre to the profound.
Right.
And hopefully our listener has come away with some new insights and perspectives.
Until next time, stay curious and keep questioning.
Yeah, aside from the marriage anecdotes, the dailyatomic.com article does mention that Jefferson has a history of mental health struggles.
Okay.
And, you know, it suggests that this lawsuit might be a manifestation of deeper emotional distress.
Yeah, so less about like a legal battle.
Right.
More about validation and attention.
Possibly, yeah.
Right.
And I think, you know, it highlights the need to approach stories like this
Right.
with empathy and nuance,
Yeah, for sure.
even if we disagree with someone's actions or beliefs.
It's important to remember that there's often a complex human story behind those choices.
Absolutely.
We can't forget that.
Yeah, and it's a good reminder to be cautious about judging people
Mm-hmm.
solely based on headlines or online comments.
Exactly. And it brings us back to the heart of this deep dive.
Uh,
You know, if we strip away the shock value
Yeah.
and all the legal wrangling,
right.
we're left with some pretty fundamental questions about beauty,
Yeah.
genetics,
Yeah.
and the very essence of what makes us human.
So where do we go from here?
Yeah.
We explored this lawsuit,
Right.
uncovered some disturbing historical parallels,
Absolutely.
grappled with some heavy ethical dilemmas. So what's the takeaway for our listener? What can we learn from all this?
Well, I think the most important takeaway is the need for critical thinking. We live in a world where information, especially online,
Right.
it can be easily manipulated and distorted.
Right.
This case is a prime example of that.
So it's not just about questioning what we see online, but it's about questioning our own assumptions
Absolutely.
and biases.
Precisely. We need to be aware of how easily subjective standards, like those related to beauty,
Right.
can be used to justify harmful actions or beliefs.
Yeah, and we need to be thoughtful
Yeah.
about the potential consequences of new technologies like genetic screening
Right.
before they become widely adopted.
Absolutely.
So it sounds like this deep dive has been a call to action for our listener.
It had.
To be more discerning, empathetic, and engaged with the complex issues that are shaping our world.
And to remember that even in the most outlandish stories, there are often valuable lessons to be learned and important conversations to be had.
Absolutely.
So the next time you see a headline that makes you raise an eyebrow, take a moment to dig a little deeper.
Right. Question it. Think about it.
Exactly. You might be surprised by what you discover.
Well said.
Yeah.
I think that's a great place to wrap up this deep dive.
I agree.
From the bizarre to the profound. Hopefully our listeners have come away with some new insights.
Some food for thought.
And perspectives.
Until next time, stay curious and keep questioning.
Beautifully said. We'll see everyone next time.
Right.